the four noble truths that the Buddha has discovered upon his awakening under the Bodhi tree some 2000 years ago or 2500 years ago were: suffering exists, suffering arises as a result of causes, suffering can be eliminated, and the way to eliminate suffering is through right view, right intention, right speech, right action, right effort, right livelihood, right mindfulness, and right concentration. Recognizing that all human beings experience suffering, figuring out how to prevent and relieve it, then acting on this knowledge are the essence of Buddhist teaching. So basically, Buddhists believe that suffering does exist, and there's doing the right things or right effort or right livelihood day to day are the only way to essence of the Buddhist teaching. The Buddhist teaching say that there are more people free themselves from desire, ill will, and ignorance, the greater their happiness. So if we could, if the Buddhists believe that if they could free themselves from desires, ill will, and ignorance, the greater their happiness is. No matter what is going on around them, when they have completely removed all desire, ill will, and ignorance, the Buddha says they will experience the same supreme happiness he discovered. That's all from Buddhism. And then with the Islamic theology, the basic principle of Islamic theology is that God has no wants or needs. Everything that God has revealed through prophets is for the well-being and prosperity of humans. Prophet gave human beings a covenant, which if they accept, it is for their own benefit. And if they reject, it is for their own damage. In Islamic law, this principle is translated into number of legal says that say, remove harm and end suffering. This is how they say always in the Islamic way. Remove the harm and your suffering will be ended. Then just Judaism people, or they say, pray 3 times daily to be healed and to avoid suffering and to have the strength to endure disaster when it inevitably occurs. So basically, Judaism people think that they should pray 3 times and everything will be healed. But maybe there's more to that than the way they pray is different. And looking at Christianity responds to suffering by 2 main ways: praying and helping those who are suffering. So basically, pray for those who are suffering and helping those who are suffering. Praying to God will help the human to be able to bear the suffering, and helping those who are suffering through their actions. So if someone is suffering by me doing some good actions, it will help them. Christianity embraces suffering as the road to redemption from our suffering. So sort of all religions agree suffering cannot be avoided, but it matters how we respond to it is the main difference. So how could loving God allow so much suffering? Is there a loving God who could pour his love and comfort into our grieving hearts? Is God really there in all our pain and heartache over loss? These are the main questions. A lot of people will approach us and ask, whether it's a Buddhism person or a Hinduism person or Christianity or any religion, will be asking this the way. Right now, most of the people are working from home during a government lockdown in isolation from their home, or some of us have returned part-time like that. The death toll of COVID-19 climbs daily. We have all been shocked to discover how vulnerable and helpless we are against a microbial virus that has taken loved ones, closed borders, closed shops, closed restaurants, and so on, and halted the economy of the whole planet. Where is God in the fear, suffering, and grief of this global pandemic? But if you ask a philosopher or an atheist, would say either God is not perfectly good and thus not willing to stop human suffering, or he might say, God is not powerful enough to end all the pain in the world. This is how an atheist would say, but we are all interfaith, so I don't agree with what atheist or the philosopher says. So I'm just going to talk about, again, with the religions, how they believe in suffering. Hinduism, it is believed that karma is the reason for suffering. Karma is not a negative thing if you know how to use it. Results of karma is received in forms of suffering and enjoyment in this world. We ourselves are responsible for good and bad things to happen for us. So with Hinduism, there are rebirths and for mankind, and whatever good karma you do as a human, your next birth could be less suffering, even though you might not be born as a human, but with another creature. So Hindus accept the suffering as some evil things which was committed by them on previous birth, and God is helping them to accept the suffering and have better life in next birth. Hindus believe in karma or intentional action. Most Hindus believe that much of suffering they endure is a result of their own actions. Previous motives and actions need to be made up for. Many would add that this is not about deserving suffering, but about taking the opportunity to learn from it. It can be understood as unfolding karma in Hindu belief. So there might be more than this from some of you who trust in Hinduism or were brought up as Hindus, but that's all I could cover from Hinduism side. Buddhists also believe in karma, but Buddhist teaching says action in this life have consequences. There is good and bad karma. By doing good karma, you can overcome bad karma. In the place of the worships of the Buddhists, which is called as Vihara in Sri Lanka, but I don't know how they call it in the other countries, the karma is represented by an endless knot. So if you Google around, you'll see the endless knot, which has no ending. It's open end both sides, which means endless interlink of cause and effects. Buddhists believe there is only two births compared to what we are talking about. Hindus believe in more births for any humans. In the first birth, if you try and address the problems, which is suffering in life, and do good karma, then in your next birth will be born as a human with good karma. Now I'm going to talk about Islamic, which is very little. Islamic religion, suffering is believed according to Quran as a wake-up call. That is, Allah punishes those who He loves in order to make them rise up higher in life. Basically, Islam asks the followers to repent and forgive their sins. Do the right things to believe in Allah. From Quranic perspective, pain and suffering restore the relationship between Allah and human beings. In Quran, very little is talked about the suffering compared to Christianity, or compared to, because Islamic and Christianity, they sort of have the same Bible, but we have Bible and they have Quran. So, but in Islamic way, they talk less about suffering compared to Christianity. In Christianity, when God makes us suffer, He's asking us to submit humans to Him. Lord is helping us to remember we do not walk in this life alone because He is our Father. Suffering doesn't mean that we are unworthy or that God is punishing us, but actually reveals God's profound love for us. For Christians, Christ on the cross is the best answer and comfort for suffering. So if Christ had to accept that big suffering, we all have to accept it to get the God's love. So basically, I'm just going to tell a small thing. It's like a story, but it's not real story. There was a little boy who wanted a ball, and mom got him a ball. And, when they're 2 years old, they keep kicking, throwing, all that happens. Whatever. One day, the little boy kicked the ball, and the front door was open, and it went out. And the mother saw the son running towards the ball and picked up the boy. And in the meantime, a car came and deflated the ball and all that stuff. But what I'm trying to say in this story is the gap between the child and the adult. What is big, but what about the gap between finite human being and infinite God, which is a big question. There's a big gap between us and the infinite God. It can be any God. It doesn't have to be Christianity God or Buddhism God or Islamic or Hinduism God. We have a finite, limited perspective. We cannot always understand the big picture, the way our God cares for us, but gives suffering for a reason. So I always accept that God gives everyone a suffering for a reason. If we attempt to push away our pain, whether it is physical or emotional, we almost always find ourselves suffering even more. We are open to suffering, inquiring into it always, instead of trying to deny it. We may see how we might make use of it in our lives. So basically, I would rather, prefer to accept the suffering instead of inquiring into it and use it as a life experience. So I feel that suffering builds character in a person, makes you compassionate, toughens you up, gives you perspective. So just for an example, just looking at moral character, capacity to suffer is suffer with dignity is the meaning of moral character. For example, if we think of the days when we want to attend an interview and get our first job in the field we like, but more likely, most of us would have been failed in our first employment interview. But that is a showing for us that we are lacking in some skills. So we have to accept that we are lacking in that skill and have to try to get more skills in that to get a better career development to wherever we are now or we have been. So the shame and humiliation of suffering from not successful for the job makes us to have better moral character to help other human beings in future. There's always a saying, beautiful people aren't born, they are built. It's the traumas, the pitfalls, and the horrible moments that made you who you are today and who you will become. Your character is composed of your life experience and your reactions to those experiences. The second one I would like to say is about the compassionate. We are always compassionate and caring towards our children when they are young, or but it's not the same thing when they grow up. And in my experience, I have had a friend who had a father who was diagnosed with bowel cancer, and the doctor took this father to the theater to do the surgery, and came back within less than what was expected time, and said, I can't do much because he's got only a few months to live. And the lady said, please, doctor, please don't tell this to my father. Say that everything went okay. And the lady, my friend, took the father home, and he lived for 8 to 9 years. And the suffering my friend had to face during this time of her father's illness has definitely made my friend a very compassionate person. And this is a real experience I have. And now, after coming to Sydney and retired from work, she spends her time volunteering at Chris O'Brien Lifehouse, which is a cancer, end of life place at the Royal Prince Hospital in Sydney. Most of us have heard of compassionate listening too. So there's compassionate caring and compassionate listening. And with the compassionate listening can help relieve suffering when other person whom we are listening has different perception. There might be a person who is talking about incorrect principle, incorrect perception, but at that time of his or her suffering, if we keep listening, which will help the person, the suffering. So basically, being compassionate is something which makes we learn from our suffering. Only once you have experienced pain can you understand that of others. Only when you have cried in the street, you can feel for the woman standing at the bus stop holding back tears. And the other small two things we learn going through suffering is it makes us more tougher because we know what we have been through and we have become more sensitive to others' feeling. If you are a sensitive person, suffering makes you become more mentally tough in your life. When you have been through some serious suffering, you always come out of the other side as a stronger person. And then the last one is it gives us perspective. When you have dealt with the actual sorrow, you see life in a different way. You understand the importance of happiness when you do have it. And the little things in life that should be appreciated. We don't most of the time appreciate when we have the happiness, but these are the little things we need to appreciate. And we get a good perspective when we have been through the actual sorrow. So those are the 4 things I feel we receive when we go through suffering, but there might be more because there was a verse we were reading and that gave more concepts. But anyway, that's the 4 I was going to talk. And suffering can make us more resilient, better able to endure hardships, just as muscles in order to build up must endure some pain, growing pain. So our emotions must endure pain in order to strengthen. One of the most significant benefits of suffering is that it breeds a deep respect for reality. No matter how beautiful or handsome, wealthy or perfectly tuned other people appear to be, they have their own sorrows. Because we are all weighed down with some problem, some insecurity, and some unhappiness, that's unique to our individual suffering. We are all prisoners of our own minds and the thoughts that drive us to depression. And it's this suffering that makes us human, that makes us able to empathize and understand one another. It is this suffering that teaches us humility and adds value to our character. God knows the wisdom behind why good things happen to bad people or why bad things happen to good people. In general, whatever causes us to turn to God is good, and we should be grateful for it. In times of crisis, people are drawn closer to God, whereas in times of comfort, we often forget from where the comfort originated, which is a sad thing. God is perfectly good and omnipotent. Yet, those attributes need not entail that he stop all suffering in the world. God might have a plan which would morally justify God allowing suffering. The existence of suffering may have certain functions which prevent God from stopping pain and suffering in the world. For instance, suffering may be necessary to produce more human happiness than a world without suffering. So my speech ends at that point, but I know there's more to suffering and we all have been through different suffering in our lives. And there might be different beliefs and from various other religions. I haven't covered Catholicism, or maybe I have not covered Hinduism much, but maybe from everyone could bring up their thoughts on the other religions at this time. Thank you, Vida. Thank you.
Thank you.
Came out of experience, personal experience and others' experience. So I appreciate very much the way it was presented. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Merina.
Thank you. And any other beliefs from Hinduism, Vasi, from your side? With the suffering.
You have covered about Hinduism better than I know.
Maybe Sachi can say, because he
Yes,
has
that's what I was about to ask.
Actually, my views are much different here. I may be the wrong person to tell, because in nature, we don't consider it as any suffering or something like that. It is by nature something is happening.
By
So
nature.
nature wants us to do appropriate actions. So people say, I am poor, I am dull, I am from this place and that and this like that. It's because main thing is we should avoid greediness and fear. Greediness is a main cause for all these things what are happening in the world. The nature has got enough for everyone if we are not greedy, but we have to go for our needy only. Say, for example, consider the animals. They live in nature and they never hoard or store food, kill other animals in a flock and put it in the fridge. Day by day, if they want to eat, they may be killing one. That is a nature order, because it's a feed chain, or what we call, it's a must for any survivor. Survival is the important thing. To survive, we don't need too much of things. Unfortunately, these days, we have got so many advancements from science and other things that we can produce enough.